Welcome to the Deep Fear channel. Watch closely, stay alert, and don't forget to subscribe. Story 1. The Cabin on Lake Hollow Road. My wife and I got married in late September of 2018. We weren't exactly the resort type of couple, so when it came time to plan our honeymoon, we both agreed on something quiet, private, and away from big crowds. After some searching online, I found a small cabin on a rental site, tucked deep in the woods of eastern Tennessee, near a place called Lake Hollow Road. The photos looked perfect. A cozy log cabin surrounded by thick forest, a private dock on the lake, and no other houses in sight. The reviews were all positive, except one. It said, "Love the place, but strange noises at night kept us awake." Probably wildlife, I remember laughing and telling my wife, "That's what we get for going to the middle of nowhere." We arrived there after a 6-hour drive from Nashville. The last 20 minutes of the trip were on a winding dirt road, no phone signal, and not a single streetlight. When we pulled up, the cabin looked even more isolated than I'd imagined, but in a beautiful way. The host had left the keys in a small lockbox and a welcome note on the table. Everything looked clean, cozy, and rustic. We unpacked, made dinner, and watched the sun go down over the lake. The air was crisp. The woods were quiet except for crickets, and it felt like the perfect start to our honeymoon. That first night, I woke up around 2:30 a.m. to what sounded like footsteps on the front porch. My wife was asleep beside me. I listened carefully. The sound was faint, slow, deliberate. Creak, creak, creak. I thought maybe it was a raccoon or a deer. But then something knocked. 2 slow, distinct knocks on the front door. I froze. After maybe 10 seconds, I whispered to my wife, "Hey, did you hear that?" She stirred, confused. When I told her someone might be outside, she looked terrified. We didn't have any neighbors nearby, and the nearest town was miles away. I grabbed a flashlight from my backpack and slowly walked to the door. I didn't open it, just peeked through the side window. The porch was empty, but the footprints were there. Bare footprints in the dirt right outside the steps. I didn't sleep much the rest of that night. The next morning, we tried to brush it off as maybe kids messing around or some drunk hiker who got lost, though that seemed unlikely. I didn't tell my wife about the footprints. That day, we explored the area, rented a canoe, and paddled around the lake. The place was peaceful. No other cabins, no boats, no people. Around dusk, we saw something that unsettled us both. A small wooden cross sticking out of the water near the far side of the lake. It looked old, maybe handmade, and half submerged. My wife asked if it was a grave marker. I joked that maybe someone's dog was buried there, but honestly, I had no clue. That night, the noises came back. Around the same time, 2 or 3 a.m., we heard something moving outside. This time it was heavier, like boots on gravel. I turned off the lamp and peered through the blinds. The porch was empty again, but I noticed a dim light moving through the trees, like someone holding a lantern. It passed slowly behind the trees and then faded out. I tried to record it on my phone, but the darkness was too thick. My wife wanted to pack up and leave right then, but I convinced her to wait till morning. I wish I hadn't. The third day, I called the rental host using the cabin's landline, the only thing that worked. I told her we'd been hearing noises and asked if anyone else lived nearby. She hesitated for a moment before saying, "There used to be another cabin across the lake, but it burned down years ago. No one lives there now." That night, everything escalated. We were in bed when we both heard whispering outside the window. Faint, but definitely voices. My wife started crying quietly, clutching my arm. I turned on the flashlight again and shouted, "Who's there?" The whispering stopped. Then came a loud thud against the side of the cabin, like someone had thrown a rock. I rushed to the window. Nothing. Another thud, this time from the opposite side. Then another. It sounded like we were surrounded. I grabbed the kitchen knife. It was the only weapon we had, and backed towards the front door. The noise suddenly stopped, replaced by total silence. After a minute, there was a knock. 3 slow knocks on the door. My wife screamed. I yelled, "We're calling the police!" Even though I knew we had no signal, I peeked through the side window again and saw a man standing there. He looked maybe mid-40s, beard, long hair, wearing what looked like old overalls. And he was barefoot. His skin looked pale, like he hadn't seen sunlight in years. He was staring straight at the door. Then he said in a low voice, "You shouldn't be here." I shut the blinds and told my wife to go to the bedroom. We barricaded the door with a chair and stayed there until the sun came up. When morning finally came, we packed everything and left. On the dirt road out, I stopped for a second because I noticed something in the trees. An old burned foundation on the far side of the lake. Maybe the remains of the other cabin the host mentioned. And in the center of the burned area was another small wooden cross, identical to the one in the lake. When we got to town, I called the sheriff's department to report what happened. The deputy who answered paused for a moment before saying, "You were out on Lake Hollow Road?" I said yes. He sighed. "You're not the first to call about that area. Don't go back there. That land's been abandoned since the fire. Locals say the family that used to live there never left." That was the last thing he said before hanging up. We never got a refund, and we never went back to Tennessee. But every now and then, when I close my eyes, I can still see that man's face through the window. Barefoot, pale, whispering words that didn't sound entirely human. And sometimes, when I dream, I hear the knocking again. Story 2. The Room at Harborview Inn. My wife and I had our honeymoon in Bar Harbor, Maine in 2021. We picked it because we both loved quiet places, lighthouses, ocean air, no crowds. We booked a small seaside hotel called the Harborview Inn, a 3-story Victorian building that had been standing since the late 1800s. It looked straight out of a painting, white wood, blue shutters, and an old bell tower that the website described as historic and charming. I didn't know then that historic sometimes just means things have happened here that people don't talk about anymore. When we checked in, the lady at the front desk, a soft-spoken older woman named Martha, greeted us with the warmest smile. She handed us our keys and said, "You're in room 305, top floor, best view of the harbor." The room was perfect. A big bay window overlooking the ocean, an old brass bed, and a soft hum of the sea breeze through the curtains. The first night, we had dinner at a seafood restaurant down the road, then walked along the pier. Everything felt peaceful, exactly what a honeymoon should be. It was around 2:15 a.m. when I first woke up. I heard the sound of footsteps in the hallway outside our room, slow, uneven, like someone dragging their feet. At first, I thought it was just another guest coming in late. But the steps didn't fade away. They stopped right outside our door. Then came 3 soft knocks. Not loud, just a light tap, tap, tap. My wife stirred beside me. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. I told her it was probably someone at the wrong door. But before I could even finish the sentence, the doorknob rattled. Gently, like someone testing if it was unlocked. I got out of bed, walked to the door, and looked through the peephole. There was no one there, just the dimly lit hallway and an old painting on the opposite wall. The next morning, I mentioned it to Martha at the front desk. She gave me a polite but uneasy smile. "Oh, the floors here creak a lot," she said. "These old buildings make all sorts of noises at night." Nothing to worry about. I wanted to believe her, but that night proved she was wrong. We spent the day exploring Acadia National Park, came back exhausted, and fell asleep by 10 p.m. At around 3 a.m., my wife woke me, whispering my name. "There's someone in the room," she said. Her voice was shaking. I sat up immediately. The only light came from the moon through the window, and in that pale glow, I could swear I saw a shape, standing near the old armchair in the corner. It looked like a woman, long hair, white dress, her back turned toward us. For a second, I thought it was just a shadow. But then she moved, her head tilted slightly as if she was listening to us. I scrambled for the lamp and flicked it on. The corner was empty. Nothing there. We didn't sleep again that night. In the morning, we found something that chilled me even more. The armchair had been turned to face the bed. I know for a fact it had been angled toward the window when we went to sleep. When I went downstairs to tell Martha again, she sighed quietly and said, "You're not the first to see her." That's when she told me about the woman in white. In the early 1900s, the Harborview Inn was owned by a man named Charles Whitby. He and his new wife, Eleanor, moved there after their wedding, planning to run it as a seaside guest house. But 3 months after they opened, Eleanor was found dead in room 305, our room. They said she drowned herself in the harbor after finding out her husband was having an affair with one of the guests. But some locals believed she never left that room. "People used to hear her crying through the walls," Martha said softly. "Guests would complain about their things being moved or the mirror fogging up with words written in it. But you know how stories go." I asked her if she believed it. She just smiled faintly and said, "Some things you stop questioning after a while." That evening, the weather turned bad. Heavy rain, waves crashing against the rocks below. The kind of storm that makes you feel isolated, even with other people around. At around 2 a.m., I woke up again. The window had blown open, curtains whipping in the wind. I got up to close it, but when I reached the sill, I noticed something outside. There was a figure on the beach, standing near the shoreline, completely still, facing the water. Even from 3 stories up, I could see her white dress clinging to her legs from the rain. She wasn't moving. I called my wife to look. When she came over, the figure was gone. Then we both noticed something else. The mirror above the dresser had fogged up, and in the mist, there were letters written by a finger. It said, "He lied." I swear neither of us could move for a full minute. I wiped the mirror clean with a towel, but the letters reappeared seconds later. That's when we packed our bags. We ran down the stairs, but when we reached the lobby, the lights were off. The old grandfather clock in the corner was ticking loudly. As we headed for the exit, something made us both freeze. The front door, the only way out, was wide open, and through it, we could see wet footprints leading inside. Small, bare, and heading straight toward the stairs. We bolted. We didn't even check out, just ran through the rain to our rental car and drove away. When we finally reached another hotel in town, I called the Harborview Inn the next morning. A different woman answered. When I asked for Martha, she said, There's no one by that name here. Are you sure you have the right number? I hung up and checked the website again. The number was the same. The listing was still up, but when I looked closer at the details, I noticed something I hadn't before. Under the photos, in small faded text, it said, "Room 305, closed for renovation due to structural damage." That was 3 days before we checked in. To this day, I don't know who Martha really was or how she had the keys to that room. But sometimes, when I hear the ocean at night, I remember the writing on that mirror. He lied, and the pale figure watching the water below. And I wonder if she ever stopped waiting for him to come back. Story 3. The Cabin in Ravenwood. Emily and Jason had been married for less than a month when they decided to escape the chaos of the city for a quiet honeymoon. They found a quaint cabin in Ravenwood, a remote forested area in northern Maine. The listing promised seclusion, fresh air, and an unforgettable experience for couples. For Emily, the word seclusion sounded romantic. For Jason, it sounded peaceful. They had no idea how wrong that word would prove to be. The drive to Ravenwood was long and winding. GPS reception faded as they approached the forest. By the time they reached the gravel path leading to the cabin, the sun was dipping behind the pine trees, casting long shadows across the road. When they arrived, the cabin looked idyllic. Wooden walls, a stone chimney, and a small porch with a swing. It smelled faintly of cedar, and the interior was rustic but cozy. Emily immediately unpacked their luggage, while Jason went outside to check the surrounding area. "Perfect spot for stargazing," Jason said, smiling, though the sun was almost gone. Emily joined him on the porch. As darkness fell, the forest seemed to close in around them. The wind whispered through the trees, making the branches sway and scrape against the cabin walls. Emily laughed nervously. "Don't tell me you're scared already," she teased. Jason shrugged. Something about this place feels off. But I think it's just the woods." That night, they ate a simple dinner and went to bed early. The cabin had only one bedroom, so they shared a large bed. The first few hours were uneventful. But around 2 a.m., Emily woke to a faint sound. At first, she thought it was the wind, but then she heard it again. Soft, deliberate tapping, like someone walking across the wooden floor of the porch. "Jason, did you hear that?" she whispered. He groaned and rolled over. "It's probably just a raccoon." "Go back to sleep." Emily stared at the ceiling, trying to convince herself it was nothing. But the tapping continued, slow and steady, punctuated by what sounded like a faint whisper. Her heart raced. She got out of bed, grabbed a flashlight, and cautiously moved to the window. Outside, the forest was pitch black. Nothing stirred. She strained her ears, but all she could hear was the wind. She told herself she was imagining it and returned to bed. Jason muttered something in his sleep, but didn't wake up. By morning, the forest seemed innocent again. Sunlight poured through the windows, birds chirped, and the cabin looked warm and welcoming. Emily laughed at herself for being paranoid, but she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. They decided to explore the nearby trail. It was quiet, with only the sound of their footsteps and the occasional rustle of leaves. They came across a small pond, and Jason suggested they take photos. Emily noticed something odd reflected in the water, a figure standing behind them. She blinked. Jason laughed when she pointed, saying it was just a tree stump. By evening, they were back at the cabin, tired but happy. The earlier tension seemed to have disappeared, replaced by the comfort of solitude. The second night was different. As they settled into bed, Emily felt uneasy. She kept hearing a faint scratching sound, like fingernails tracing along wood, coming from the walls themselves. She woke Jason again. "Jason, it's happening again." Jason, now slightly concerned, got up with her. They turned on all the lights, checked the windows, and even went outside. The forest was still and silent, except for the occasional rustle of leaves. "That's weird," Jason admitted. "It doesn't sound like an animal. It's closer." They returned to bed, but sleep didn't come easily. Around 3:30 a.m., the scratching turned into soft, almost imperceptible whispering. Emily strained to listen. The words were indistinct, but she could have sworn she heard her name. "Emily! Emily!" She shook Jason awake. "I heard it again." Someone's outside. Jason grabbed a flashlight and opened the door. The porch was empty. No footprints, no signs of human presence, only the forest. The whispering stopped as suddenly as it had started, but Emily couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was in the cabin with them. The next morning, Emily suggested they go back to the city early. Jason didn't want to cut their honeymoon short, but agreed to explore a bit more before leaving. As they were packing, Jason noticed something strange. Faint scratches along the floorboards, leading from the bedroom to the living room. They hadn't been there before. Curious, they followed the marks and discovered a hidden trapdoor under the rug in the corner of the living room. Jason hesitated, but Emily insisted they see what was inside. With some effort, they opened the trapdoor to reveal a narrow, dark staircase descending into the basement. The air was damp and musty. The beam of their flashlight revealed walls lined with old, faded photographs of people. Some looked normal. Others had eyes scratched out or mouths marked with black ink. Emily felt her stomach twist. What is this place?" she whispered. Jason didn't answer. He continued down the stairs. In the far corner of the basement, they found a small wooden box. Inside were dozens of journal entries, all written by previous visitors to the cabin. Emily picked one up at random. The entries started innocently, talking about their stay, but gradually they became darker. "Things in the cabin, watching me, whispers at night. I can't leave." Emily dropped the journal. Her heart was racing. "We have to go. Now." Jason nodded. But as they turned to leave, a soft voice whispered from the shadows, "Don't go." Emily and Jason scrambled up the basement stairs, the journals slipping from Emily's hands and scattering across the living room floor. They slammed the trapdoor shut and locked it with the old, rusted latch. The cabin, which had felt quaint just hours before, now seemed menacing, as if its wooden walls were closing in. That night, they didn't sleep. Emily lay awake listening to the wind, trying to convince herself it was nothing. But Jason, who normally slept soundly, kept tossing and turning, muttering to himself. Emily watched as he murmured fragmented phrases. "Emily can't leave. The forest." "Jason," she whispered, shaking him. He snapped awake, blinking rapidly. I don't know what I was saying," he stammered. But his eyes had a wild edge, one Emily had never seen before. Around 1 a.m., the whispering returned. This time, it wasn't outside. It was inside the room, coming from the corners, from beneath the bed, from the closet. It was faint, almost coaxing, repeating over and over, "Stay. Stay forever. Don't leave." Emily's skin crawled. She grabbed Jason's arm. "We're leaving tomorrow morning. No arguments." Jason nodded, but Emily noticed a small, almost imperceptible twitch in his eye. A flicker of farts, uncertainty. The next day, they tried to distract themselves with a walk in the forest. But something was wrong. The trail they had followed the day before now seemed different. Branches that hadn't been in their path yesterday now blocked the way. The pond appeared farther than before, and no matter which direction they turned, the cabin was always just out of reach, hidden behind a wall of trees. Emily's phone had no signal. Her GPS kept glitching, pointing in circles. "Jason, I think we're lost," she said, panic creeping into her voice. I know," he admitted. "It's like the forest. It's shifting." Shadows flitted between the trees, moving faster than any animal should. Emily thought she saw figures, tall, thin silhouettes, but whenever she blinked, they were gone. And then the whispers started again, carried on the wind. "Stay. Stay. Stay." They ran, trying to follow the trail, but the forest seemed to twist around them. Every landmark they recognized vanished. It was as if the woods themselves had become alive, bending reality, herding them toward something they couldn't see. By the third night, the cabin had become unbearable. Emily noticed Jason acting strangely. He would stare at corners of the room that she could see nothing in. Sometimes, he whispered to someone, or something she couldn't see. His once loving smile now felt forced, twitching. Emily tried to confront him. "Jason, what's happening to you?" I don't know," he admitted. "But I feel like it's calling me. It wants me to stay." Emily felt a shiver run down her spine. "We're leaving tomorrow, no matter what. You hear me?" Jason's gaze was distant, glazed. Yes. But what if it's the only place where we can be happy forever?" Emily's stomach dropped. The words didn't sound like her husband. They sounded like someone else speaking through him. Desperate, Emily searched the cabin for clues. The basement trapdoor had been mysteriously unlocked. Inside, the journals had multiplied. Entire walls were now covered with entries from past visitors. One thing was horrifyingly clear. Every couple who had stayed in the cabin had written the same story, over and over, about whispering walls, shifting forests, and the feeling of being watched. All of them vanished eventually. Some journals contained cryptic drawings, stick figures with hollow eyes, shadowy hands reaching out of walls, doors that led nowhere. The words, "Stay forever," were scrawled across multiple pages in what looked like different handwriting, but all equally frantic. Emily realized the cabin wasn't just haunted, it was alive. It consumed people, twisting their minds, feeding off their fear and devotion until there was nothing left. The final night arrived. Emily tried to stay calm, but the cabin seemed to anticipate her fear. The walls moaned, shadows danced across the ceiling, and Jason no longer seemed like himself. "Emily, stay with me. Stay forever," he whispered, eyes black as coal. Emily ran to the door. It wouldn't open. Windows were sealed. The trapdoor in the floor seemed to pulse, almost breathing. She backed into a corner, shaking as the whispers intensified, echoing in her skull. "Stay, stay, stay." Then she heard it, footsteps descending from the attic above, slow, deliberate, not human footsteps. Something enormous, dragging, moving closer. Jason stepped toward her, a twisted smile on his face. Emily realized with horror that he was no longer her husband. Not really. The forest had claimed him first. "Join us," the shadows whispered. Emily knew she had only one chance. Grabbing a fireplace poker, she swung at Jason, breaking the hold of whatever had possessed him. He collapsed, dazed. The attic door creaked open, revealing a black mass of shifting shadows, whispering her name. Heart pounding, Emily ran for the basement. The trapdoor opened as if welcoming her. She jumped inside, descending into the darkness. Hours later, or maybe minutes, time had no meaning. Emily found herself in a tunnel beneath the cabin. Dozens of journals lined the walls. Whispers followed her, echoing every fearful thought she had ever had. Finally, she saw a faint light at the end. She ran toward it. When she emerged, she was outside, but not in the forest. She was in a clearing surrounded by the skeletal remains of other cabins, decayed and abandoned. And standing in the center, waiting, were figures that looked like Jason and other honeymooners, smiling, hollow-eyed, whispering, "Stay forever." Emily screamed. The forest closed in behind her. She ran, but the trees moved like they were alive, reshaping the path, driving her back. And then she realized the cabin wasn't in the forest was inside the cabin. Emily ran blindly through the clearing, heart hammering, lungs burning. The hollow-eyed figures of former honeymooners whispered in unison, echoing from all directions. "Stay, stay forever. Join us." Branches whipped at her face, roots snaked across the ground, tripping her. Every time she thought she had found a path out, the forest shifted. Trees that were once behind her now blocked the way forward. Shadows stretched across the clearing, thickening, forming shapes that almost, but not quite, resemble human faces. Jason appeared ahead, standing unnervingly still. Emily froze. His eyes were black voids, his smile impossibly wide. "Emily, come with me. It's warm here. Safe," he said. "No, Jason. Fight it. Fight whatever is controlling you," she screamed. But Jason's body was already gone, replaced by the shadowy form of the cabin itself. Walls bent outward like the forest was breathing, stretching to block her escape. The whispers turned into chanting, low and guttural. "Stay. Forever. Belong." Emily turned and ran in the opposite direction, trying to ignore the figures circling her. Each step felt heavier, the forest feeding on her fear, slowing her down. The air smelled of decay and smoke. She stumbled over a root and fell to her knees, gasping. Desperation led Emily back to the cabin. It loomed larger than she remembered, as if it had grown overnight. The door opened silently, inviting her inside. She hesitated, but realized she had nowhere else to go. The forest outside was alive, hunting her. Inside, the cabin was distorted. Hallways stretched impossibly long, doors led to rooms that shouldn't exist. Each step echoed in a way that was wrong, unnatural. The walls pulsed with a faint heartbeat. She could feel it in her chest, synchronizing with her own pulse. She found herself in the basement again. The trapdoor that had once been a gateway now opened into a massive cavern, filled with the collected journals of countless victims. Figures moved among them, their eyes hollow, whispering, tracing words onto the walls in frantic scribbles. A familiar voice hissed, "Emily!" It was Jason. He stepped out of the shadows, but only half-formed. His lower body was twisting into darkness, blending into the cavern itself. "Stay with me. Forever," he moaned. Emily screamed and swung the fireplace poker, hitting him. He vanished into shadows, letting out a sound that was not human, a shriek that echoed through the cavern. Emily ran deeper into the basement cavern, following a faint beam of light. she realized with terror. Every journal was written in her own handwriting. The words were her thoughts, memories of fear, scribbled as if someone or something had forced her to relive them. The whispers were inside her head now, repeating faster, more insistently, "Stay, stay, stay." She backed into a corner, hyperventilating, when she noticed something terrifying. The walls were alive, shifting. Faces formed in the wood grain, mouths moving, screaming silently. Fingers of shadow reached out, brushing her arms, her hair, her face. Emily tried to run, but the cavern bent around her. Every exit led back to the same room. The whispering had grown into a roar. "You belong here. You are ours." And then she saw it. The cabin itself had become a living entity, breathing, expanding, swallowing everything in the cavern. Shadows of past victims coalesced into a monstrous form, their hollow eyes staring at her, their mouths moving in a silent scream. Emily understood the terrible truth. She could never leave. The cabin fed on fear, trapping minds, twisting reality. But she could fight, she realized, at least for a moment. She grabbed a journal, ripping pages and throwing them into the cavern. The shadows shrieked in protest. The whispers faltered, then surged again. She smashed furniture, anything she could use as a weapon, pounding at the walls. Jason appeared again, half human, half shadow. "Emily, stay with me." "No," she screamed, striking him with the poker. The shadows recoiled, hissing. For a moment, it felt like she had a chance. And then, silence. Emily found a narrow tunnel that hadn't been there before. Crawling through the darkness, she emerged in the forest. Morning light streamed through the trees. She thought she had escaped. She ran, never looking back. Hours later, Emily reached the edge of Ravenwood, where the forest thinned and the road appeared. A car drove by and she waved frantically. A driver stopped and offered help. But as she reached the road, she realized something horrifying. The forest behind her was gone. Ravenwood didn't exist on any map. GPS didn't recognize the location. The driver looked at her strangely, as if she had come from nowhere. Emily tried to speak, but the words stuck in her throat. The whispering returned, faint but unmistakable, as if carried on the wind. "Stay, forever, belong." And then, in the corner of her vision, she saw it. A faint shadow in the shape of a cabin, lurking in the distance, waiting. Emily screamed, but no one could hear her. Emily vanished that day. No one found her. The road back to Ravenwood remained empty. The cabin, however, waited, quiet, patient, alive. And somewhere in a whispering corner of the forest, or maybe in the mind of the next unlucky couple, the words lingered, "Stay, stay, stay." Ravenwood claimed another soul.
If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe.